For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want you to imagine this. You're a fan of the New England Patriots, and you're about to play a game at home in December against a pretty decent AFC East rival over at Foxborough Stadium. The Patriots are absolutely terrible. They've won 2 games all season, and even though you had some expectations for them heading into the season, they have been all but destroyed as the year has gone on. Your coach is about to get fired. He's a dead man walking. You're in line to get one of the top picks in the NFL draft, and you decide, in all of your stupidity or foolishness or whatever you want to call it, that you actually want to watch this team play, and you actually want to be there in person to watch this game unfold. Because why not? And as is tradition during every single Pats game that you go to, you decide that you want to get a beverage. You need some liquid to enjoy what you're about to watch, which in all likelihood is not going to be anything close to resembling good football. And so, you go to the concession stand, only to find out that you're getting screwed over massively, because said concession that you've gotten at every single game, and that you're in reliance of, is not available. If this story sounds familiar, it's because I did a video about it with a controversy involving this game that you've been watching. A 1992 game between the Patriots and the Colts, and hot chocolate. So if you want to learn more about that, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, I bring this up because that was not the first time in Patriots history that something like this exact scenario happened. Seriously, if I had a nickel for every time the Patriots entered a December game at Foxborough Stadium with 2 wins against an AFC East team fighting for a playoff spot, and the fans couldn't buy the beverage that they wanted to due to some concession worker screwing them over, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Only this time, we're not talking about hot chocolate. We're talking about beer, which might have been the only way you could have survived the season as a fan of the Patriots back in 1981, considering how bad they were. Because if you wanted to watch your Patriots close out their home slate of games, and you wanted to watch them play the Buffalo Bills in a game that they were expected to not have a fighting chance in, you'd have to do it without any ounce of liquid courage in your system. And the reason why? It had nothing to do with the fans themselves or the behavior of select fans or a safety issue. This is not like a situation from 1990 between the Los Angeles Raiders and the Pittsburgh Steelers, where there were legitimate security concerns for banning beer sales, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Instead, it had everything to do with the greed, the ignorance, the arrogance, and the stupidity of one worker who ruined it for tens of thousands of people. Because this is the story behind the idiot that screwed over Patriots fans during their regular season home finale in 1981. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and why no Pats fans were allowed to drink beer because of the actions of this one person, we need some context to understand the importance of the game at hand, as well as a policy in place across many venues throughout the sporting world, especially in the United States. It's December 13th, 1981. It's week 15 of the NFL season, and as we're heading into the penultimate week of the season, and what is the final game for the Patriots at home in what has been a dreadful season for them, we've got an AFC East battle between the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Nothing has gone right for the Patriots this season, and I truly mean nothing. After a 1980 campaign where they were 10-6 and just missed the playoffs, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, they were the furthest thing from the playoffs in 1981, as they were 2-12 with the second worst record in football, only 1 game better than the Baltimore Colts. The bizarre part is that they weren't getting blown out in these games or playing uncompetitive football. Their point differential was only -37, and was actually better than the St. Louis Cardinals, Green Bay Packers, and Oakland Raiders, 3 teams who were 7-7 and right in the thick of things for a playoff spot. The Patriots didn't lose any game by more than 2 possessions, and even though they entered this game against Buffalo on a 7-game losing streak, they were only outscored by 46 points, or less than 7 points per game. It was a bizarre season in a lot of ways, none of which were good. But still, the Pats had a chance to play spoiler against the Buffalo team that entered at 9-5 and desperately needed a win to keep their playoff hopes alive, and to keep their chances at winning the AFC East alive, as they were half a game back of the Miami Dolphins at 9-4-1. And even though the Bills won the first meeting between these two teams in dramatic fashion, taking it 20-17 on a game-winning 36-yard Hail Mary from Joe Ferguson to Roland Hooks with no time left, this one wouldn't be quite as dramatic, as this was one of those sequels that absolutely failed to live up to the original. Not that I think anyone was expecting anything along those lines to begin with. Again, in terms of the score, this wasn't the worst, as the Pats kept it within single digits. However, there was never a moment in the contest where you genuinely thought the Patriots had a chance to win it. When the final whistle sounded, it was Buffalo who came out on top, taking it by a final score of 19-10. The Bills never trailed at any point, and were in complete control of the contest after taking a 14-0 lead early in the first quarter. Buffalo never turns it over, while the Patriots turned it over twice. The Bills had more than double the rushing yards that the Patriots had, winning that battle 192-97. The Bills had 100 more yards than New England did on the day, winning that battle 329-204. This was the second fewest yards that the Pats had in a game all year. And it was a rough day at the office for New England quarterbacks, as combined, they posted just 107 net passing yards and went 12 for 28, completing less than 43% of their passes. It was a convincing win for Buffalo, as they inch one step closer to their second straight playoff appearance. So if you were one of the 42,000 fans inside Schaefer Stadium on this day, and you were cheering for the Patriots, already, it was not a pleasant experience. From a wind chill standpoint, it was 21 degrees, so you were freezing your butt off in double-digit mile-per-hour winds. Your team was bad, and you witnessed yet another loss in what was becoming one of the worst and most disappointing seasons in franchise history, if it wasn't already. But maybe you could take comfort in the fact that you could drink some beer, right? There's nothing like a stadium beer. You could get drunk and forget your troubles at this football game. Well, turns out, you couldn't even do that. And the reason why you couldn't do that for this game? For that, we've got to go back 2 months to one of the few bright spots in New England's season, as in, one of their 2 wins, which turned out to be a loss because of what happened next. October 18th, 1981, the New England Patriots are taking on the Houston Oilers, and for the second and the final time all season, the Patriots actually get a win. This was their final win of the season before they ended the year on a 9-game losing streak, and this one was not even close, as the Pats blew Houston out of the water, winning that game 38-10. After trailing 10-7 at the half, a switch flipped in the second half, and the Patriots scored the final 31 points of the game while forcing Ken Stabler to throw 4 interceptions, and while the offense racked up 436 yards of total offense, which was one of their best totals of the season. It was a great second half for the Patriots in just about every metric. The offense was clicking, the defense pitched a shutout and was clicking, and all in all, it seemed like for one of the few times all season, nothing could go wrong for the Patriots in this half. However, not even that was true, because there were some major troubles at the concession stand. You see, much like a lot of stadiums, Schaefer Stadium had regulations with regards to their beer sales and when you could sell alcohol to patrons, with the stadium banning all beer sales 15 minutes after halftime. You could buy a beer anytime you got into the stadium, but by the time the second half started, so sometime around 2:35 Eastern for a 1 o'clock game, assuming a halftime at 2:20, you could sell beer until 2:50. Once 2:50 hit, you had to close up shop. This was done for a variety of reasons, many of which make sense. Number one, you want people to sober up before they have to drive back on the road. Let's say a 1 o'clock game ends at 4:10, which seemed to be the norm back then. Close the beer sales at 2:50, it takes about 15 minutes for a fan to get from their seats to the car, and they're not in the car until 4:25, so they would not have had alcohol sold to them for more than an hour and a half, meaning that they should be safe to drive and have time to sober up. Obviously, it doesn't always work out like that, but that's the reasoning behind it. Number 2, people probably aren't buying their first beer around this time. You're probably buying a beer before this, and the more beers in someone's system, the rowdier and more violent they get. And this was a massive problem for the Patriots. This mainly applied for Monday night games, which were infamous over at Foxborough, but it applied for the entire season as well, with a Foxborough police chief saying that 128 people got arrested at the stadium over the course of the 8 home games in 1980. There was one incident in 1974 where fans were so rowdy that they literally ran out of room in the jail to hold them. So the stadium had this rule in place for every game for obvious reasons, including the game you're watching between the Patriots and the Oilers. But sometimes, people don't think that rules apply to them. Sometimes, people think that they're above the law and they're special, and they can do whatever they want, and they wind up ruining it for everyone else in the process. Because at 2:50 on the day of that Patriots-Oilers game, a man by the name of Michael Stein was working the counter at one of the many beer stands throughout the stadium. It was time to close up shop, and he had 10 beers left to sell. So what did he decide to do? Well, in all his stupidity, he decided to keep the stand open. Now, why there was no one near him in the stadium to tell him you can't do this, because maybe he just lost track of the time, I don't know. But he really wanted to make sure all 10 of those beers got sold. I'm guessing beer back then cost about $2. So he really wanted to make sure he walked away with an extra $20. A fairly insignificant amount of money in the grand scheme of things, even back in 1981. And that's when the situation got worse. At this point, we were 20 minutes past the deadline. If it was 2:50 where the beer sales had to be cut off, it was 3:10. Still, determined to sell those 10 extra beers, he kept that stand open. An officer by the name of Emmett Wakovich saw the stand open and ordered Stein to close down the stand. By this point, you'd think that nothing would happen. Just close down the stand and you get off scot-free, and that's the end of it. The show's over, it's time to go home. But incredibly enough, Stein, despite getting an order from a police officer to close up the stand, refused to do this. Seriously, he refused to close up shop, even though he knew what he was doing was illegal, and even though he got an order from a policeman to do so. Absolute idiot, all over the possibility of making his company, so not even him, an extra $20. I just have to say before going any further and talking about how this impacted the fans in the game between these two teams behind me right here, this might be the dumbest and the stupidest vendor in the history of the National Football League. You are a concession stand worker. This is not your beer. You are not making tips. You are not making extra money off of selling this beer. You are getting nothing out of this. You are working overtime for no reason. You're not getting extra pay. Your hourly pay is actually less than if you just stopped at $2.50 like you were supposed to. This isn't a man who is going the extra mile or anything like that. This is a man who was just a complete moron. And after investigating the situation, when it came to this game in Week 15 between the Patriots and the Bills, Foxborough issued their punishment. No beer sales. Fans want to buy a beer during this game? Too bad. You ruined it. One random person at the counter ruined it. You would think that the punishment would be that this person is banned from working at the stadium, or that the one stand is closed out of the many in the stadium, or that this person would be prohibited from selling alcohol anywhere in the city. But nope. The city decided to lay the hammer down and upset tens of thousands of fans who did nothing wrong because of one idiot. Said Stein upon the announcement, "That was a mistake of my judgment." Nah, I don't really think that was a mistake. A mistake is when you do something that you didn't mean to do. Maybe you could say the mistake was initially going past the deadline. Maybe you lost track of the time. But the moment you started fighting with the police over this, it no longer became a mistake. It became a choice. A dumb choice, but a choice nonetheless. It's like if you get pulled over for going 20 over the speed limit because you didn't know how fast you were going. Look, that happens. That's a mistake. But if the cop pulls you over and you become argumentative with him and refuse to follow his instructions, That's no longer a mistake. And because of one man who just happened to be working behind the counter, no one could buy beer on this day in 1981. Now you might be asking yourself an all-important question. Why didn't the Canteen Corporation appeal this decision? Why did they allow this to happen and have beer sales banned for the game between these two teams behind me right here? Well, they considered it, but they realized it was probably not the smartest idea to do so. You see, the last home game the Patriots had before this was a game against the St. Louis Cardinals, and that game drew less than 40,000 people. The Patriots season was over, and this game was only expected to get 42,000 people, about 65% of what the stadium held. So the Canteen Corporation figured that if they appealed the decision, yeah, they'd probably be able to sell beer for that game, but they'd probably just lose their license for one game in 1982, when attendance is likely to be way higher. So they just bit the bullet and decided not to sell beer for that Patriots Bears game. Probably a smart business decision, but still just really stupid that it had to happen in the first place. One person ruining it for everyone stinks. It'd be different if it was a company mandate that you were to sell beer past the deadline. It'd be different if it was a company official doing this. It'd be different if there were other beer companies in the stadium. But nope, this was just one vendor who acted on his own accord, decided to break the rules, and then not comply with an officer's orders, and screwed over the many people who wanted beer on that day. I'm not sure what exactly happened to Michael Stein after this game. I dug high and low and couldn't find anything. And anything that did have his name is negated by the fact that it is an extremely common name. Regardless, on this day in 1981, as if the loss and the inept play of the Patriots wasn't bad enough, this ruling and the actions of one idiot made Pats fans who attended this cold day at the stadium say, "You've got to be kidding me." Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.